Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Herald's Horn. This one's a little bit different. It's a holiday week here in the US. I'm traveling to see family, blah, 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 blah. So this one's a little more chill. This one's a little more different. Front half of the episode, Dan and I just chop it up a little bit about Mark Rosewater's panel at MagicCon Las Vegas, the 20 worst mechanics of all time. We kind of chat through all the different 20 mechanics. Some we give more time than others, but the real star of the show today, we have Wizards of the Coast senior game designer Carmen Klomparens after the break to talk about my 6 favorite cards from Foundations. 3 old, 3 new. I ask her, pick her brain about kind of the stories behind these different cards, how they came to be, why they decided to reprint them in Foundations, all that kind of fun stuff. We also talk about Foundations generalized. It's a great conversation. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for listening.
If you knew this about me, but do you know the franchise Fast and Furious?
Yes, I am familiar.
That was loosely based on how quickly I'm able to click my mouse.
Just smashing it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, the guys who wrote that saw me clicking my mouse, and they were like, you know, it'd be crazy if The Rock robbed a truck full of combination VHS TV players. Oh, wait, he wasn't in that one.
Hello, and welcome to the Herald's Horn, a part of the One Shot Network. This is a very special episode of the Herald's Horn. It's a holiday week. Emma couldn't be here. She was getting in from some traveling. And you know what? I don't really even have a plan for today. Nothing much happened news-wise. There's not really any products to talk about, but I still wanted to put it on an episode this week, and there's a really good interview, but I figured, at the very least, I could be joined by the one and only Dan. What's up, Dan?
What's up? It's goofing time. We're here to do some goofing. Goof o'clock. Half past goof 30.
Run theme song. And welcome back. This is normally where we'd be going into the news, but there's no news. There's no product watch. We could probably theoretically do a co-host notebook, but I'm sure Dan will just talk about whatever they'd like to anyways. The one focused bit of conversation we are going to have today, this is something I've kind of had on, the potential. Talk about this sometimes if we don't really ever have something to talk about, and this week we kind of don't. So I wanted to look at Mark Rosewater's panel from MagicCon Las Vegas, the worst 20 mechanics of all time, according to Mark Rosewater. Dan, I assume you have the list in front of you. I have the list in front of me.
I do.
Excellent.
Yeah, do we want to run down the top 20, just list them off? Like I can do the first 10, you can do the next 10?
That sounds great to me. But first, I want to give the listeners some a little bit of context of how Mark Rosewater thinks about these mechanics. These are from a design perspective, and what Mark cares about as a designer is a bit different from what we might care about as players. These are not necessarily the most broken mechanics of all time. These are not even necessarily the most boring mechanics of all time. These are mechanics that for one reason or another are just incredibly offensive to Mark from a design sensibility.
That's actually really good context, because I actually did not know that. I have not listened to the panel, so that definitely shapes how I think about this. That's interesting. Okay, so to kick us off, we got number 20. I'm just going to go number 20 through 11. We've got stickers, Megamorph at 19, Companion, Haunt. That's got to be one of the Innistrad mechanics. I can't remember that one. We'll have to do do you remember what set this is from?
Yeah, exactly.
We've got Annihilator, Devoid, Partner, number 14, Miracle at 13, Forecast at 12, and Initiative at 11.
At 10, we've got Cleave. 9 is Unmemorable, which we can talk about in a second. 8 is Epic. 7 is Fateful Hour. 6 is Day/Night. 5 is Radiance. 4 is Recover. 3 is Sweep. 2 is Gotcha. And 1 is Bands with Others. So, Dan, I guess we could start all the way back at number 20. Do you have any strong feelings? We're just gonna, I guess, we can give our really top level thoughts about any mechanic and why we think it might be on here. And if we have any further thoughts, we can kind of dive into those. Dan, do you have any strong thoughts about stickers?
I would certainly agree that Stickers deserves to be on here. It is certainly one of the worst mechanics of all time. It is overly complicated. It is a sort of thing that has nothing to do with the rest of the game. It will not enhance your experience of knowing anything else about Magic. It is just its own little trivial thing. And yeah, they're very stinky. It's sort of easy to understand at some points, I guess, but it gets overly complicated for no particular reason.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you. And it's just like one of those things, feels like a really cute idea, and it would have been, I think, just a cute, fun idea if it had never actually been brought into like real legality. Because this is from Unfinity, and if it had just been an Unfinity specific silver bordered mechanic, cool, fun, interesting. But instead, it got brought on over to real cards legality, and we have Sticker Goblin to deal with to this day.
Yeah. Sticker Goblin I can at least understand, but it did have to be explained to me several times. But yeah, I just wish that it was all silver bordered and we did not have to understand this at all.
Yep. So I wanted to, the 19 Megamorph, I wanted to just like, Megamorph, whatever, it's fine. It's like kind of a cool-ish draft mechanic, but I know why Marto has it on here. I did watch the panel, but also he's talked about Megamorph a lot. He's just like, it's lazy, and even though it's theoretically like an awesome mechanic, it's an awesome mechanic in that it has really interesting gameplay for limited and that kind of stuff. It's like makes your morph creatures like that much just like slightly better and all that kind of stuff. For the context listeners, Megamorph is perhaps exactly what it sounds like on the tin. It is Morph. You can cast the card face down as a 2/2 for 3, but then you can turn it up at any time for its Megamorph cost, and it gets a +1/+1 counter.
Whoa! Wow!
So, like...
That's mega.
Exactly. The play of that is, like, interesting. It's a twist on Morph. Cool. But they made two major mistakes with it that I think kind of sunk it. Number one, the name kind of stinks.
Oh my gosh, so much. Yeah, you gotta at least pretend it's not the exact same thing.
Exactly. And they put it in a set directly after Morph. So like Khans was a Morph set. This is in Dragons of Tarkir. They were like, ooh, look guys, we made Morph slightly different. And if it had had a different name or had been in a context that was not directly following a set that, you know, had Morph already as a key mechanic, then maybe it would have been a better mechanic. But, you know, this is just one of those mechanics we'll probably never see again, and that's okay.
Yeah. I would assume that there's some sort of maybe like thematic reasoning of like Morph and Megamorph being in the same block because like the Dragons of Tarkir is different than the Khans of Tarkir universe, but that is really stretching and not sufficient.
Yep, exactly. 18 Companion. Any strong Companion thoughts, Dan?
It's, you know, Partner is notoriously bad. Companion is not worse, but I don't know. It's not a whole lot better.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of really cool ideas present in the basal design of Companion. Companion, of course, listeners, being it's like a creature that you can technically have in your sideboard that gets to start the game in a special companion zone, kind of like the command zone, if you fulfill its the requirements on it. The most problematic one was Luris, which is just like you get Luris for free if all of your permanent spells cost 2 or less, and then he lets you cast permanent spells from your graveyard that cost 2 or less. Way too good.
Yeah.
Way too good.
To be honest, this is a one that like threw me so hard that I was like, wow, Magic is a different game than I grew up with.
I think this is like a mechanic that's very cool and interesting on the tin. Like, ooh, cool, you get a very explicit bonus for following a very theoretically tough to follow deck building restriction. But it feels like they just missed the actual power level of the cards that they made, and therefore we'll just never get to see Companion ever again.
Yeah, if Luris was like all spells have to be 2 CMC or less, that would make it a lot more restrictive, obviously, in what you can do with it. And like if you look at designs that like Karuga or something like that people play a lot in casual EDH, some of them are like very fun and interesting because they do like make a tall ask of what they require you to do. But yeah, the ones that are just like, you know, Yorion, just add 20 extra cards to your deck that you already wanted to play. Like that's, yeah, not extremely interesting.
Definitely. All right, Dan, can you tell me what Haunt does or what set it is from?
Okay, I think I can't remember what the name of the Innistrad set is, but I want to say it's the one that has the wolf head set symbol.
It is not from. I was going to say Crimson Vow, but that's the wrong one. Midnight. It is not from Midnight Hunt. I'll give you a hint.
No, this is an older mechanic than that, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Haunt is something like. I don't remember exactly how it works, but I think you like exile the card, or when it's in your graveyard at something, it haunts another creature, and it's sort of like an aura, but it exists like in a different zone.
That is correct. Haunt. When this card is put into a graveyard from play, remove it from the game, haunting target creature. And then this random one that I pulled up as an example, Belfry Spirit. When Belfry Spirit comes into play, or the creature it haunts is put into a graveyard, put 2/1/1 black bat creature tokens with flying into play. This is the Orzhov, the original Orzhov mechanic from Guild Pact.
Okay, I was confusing this with Disturb, but I actually just ran into a card with Haunt like the other day. I don't remember why.
Yep. And I think a really big problem that it had is it's like not only is it like kind of weird and hard to track, kind of like you were just saying, it's like kind of like an aura enchantment, but the card that's haunting is in the exile zone. A lot of all of the cards are like all over the place. Like the one I just named, it cares about the creature it haunts. Oh wait, no. I think all the things that haunts just care about dying. Never mind. Yeah, all of these things care about the creature it haunts being put into the graveyard. So you just have to like do a whole bunch of tracking, and then it might eventually become relevant. And it's just like, okay, who cares?
Yeah, I'm immediately thinking, like, in a competitive setting, like, it is so easy to miss that a creature your opponent controls is haunted by a thing in their graveyard, because it's not, like, it doesn't even have the, like, the flashback little, like, gravestone or anything on it, you know? It's just chilling there, and you are in charge of remembering that.
I'm not surprised that we'll never see that one again. It's weird, hard to track, seems hard to design for, everything bad. Annihilator thoughts, Dan?
It's a bummer. It's just not fun.
Yeah, it's just like, okay. I think it's like, I have one thing to say about it. I think it's just like the most emblematic maybe of a mechanic that they try to avoid these days, but it's just like, peak, the game isn't technically over yet, but the game is over. Like, you don't know that the game's over yet, but the game's over. I have Annihilator, even if you like Annihilator to someone or whatever, it's just like, give up.
Well, even if, like, you're in the prime scenario of, like, your Sneak and Show deck, you show and tell an Emrakul on turn 3, turn 4, you swing for 15 and make your opponent sacrifice 6 permanents, they still have 5 life left.
Yeah, the game is still not, like, technically over. Like, they should concede at that point, but they're not dead. They don't have any permanents, but they're not dead.
If you sneak it, the Emrakul's even gone, and then you're just like, well, there's still nothing they're just gonna draw a Grizzlebrand.
And then I'm gonna lose. Devoid. Speaking of more Eldrazi design mistakes, Devoid is technically a keyword, and all it does, it's like technically a mechanic, but all it does is it notates the fact that the creature has no color.
Yeah. This was at the very beginning of my playing Magic seriously as an adult, and I remember looking at this and being like, this does not matter. Like, and I don't think it really comes up at all very much within the set. I'm sure there must be a few things that care about colors to, like, make it stick, but, like, it's not like, as if, like, there's, like, a
Fire Blade. Maybe. Yeah. That might have literally just been in a different set entirely.
I think that first appeared in Cons because of the morphs. But it's not correct. Like there's a race of creatures in, like, BFZ that it's like, these can only block colorless creatures, or these can only block black creatures, or something like that. It's just like a bunch of Eldrazi that have one or more colors in their pips are colorless in their identity.
And it's like I can see, like, even if they don't care about it much mechanically, it's kind of like a cool flavor thing, because there had never actually been, Eldrazi before that cost colored mana, but I guess they wanted to just keep them flavoredly colorless.
It does come up sometimes if you're deck building in that sphere, like in EDH, and you have the whole card pool to work with now, which is kind of interesting. But, like, this was almost 10 years ago now. There's much less to do with your your colorless Eldrazi that happened to also cost a red mana.
I agree. And it also did cause some like really weird, like feels bad situations on accident too, just by how it had to be formatted. Or I would say like Devoid, and then it has like a cast trigger or an ETB trigger, and then it has its normal keywords that you would usually see up towards the top of the card, way down on the bottom of the card, and a lot of people miss it. I think like the classic one there is like, oh, World Breaker has reach.
Yes, yeah,
you would never know that because it is the fourth line of text on the card, and that is usually the first thing you see on the card. Well, it's the third thing on the card, but its second ability when you cast World Breaker, exile target artifact, enchantment, or land has 2 lines. But yeah, Devoid, just kind of a stinker. Partner, ass.
I play them all the time at CDH. I can't be mad at them, but they suck.
Yeah, it's just like one of those. It has caused a lot of problems in that like it's really hard to pass up playing partner commanders. But the mechanic is strong enough now that they'll probably never make another like real partner commander. They've messed around with like partner with, which is kind of cool, but
Yeah, you have to make it like at least a lot more confined than just partners, because even when they went back to Commander Masters and like, we'll do one color partners, and look at how funny Rograk is. He has no power and toughness, and he doesn't have any abilities or a mana cost, but that also turns on Fierce Guardianship. Isn't that weird? And then it doesn't create very interesting decks, I think. Although I don't know, we're fighting this against just like the 2024 design philosophy, so like I guess we're kind of either at a state where we're either playing Rograk Silas or we're playing Tivit, etc. So I don't know.
Miracle, I will just say they just consider it to be a pretty tough mechanic because it asks you to play and think about Magic in an entirely different way than you normally would. When you're thinking about Miracle, every turn when you draw your card, you have to like look at it purposefully, make sure it doesn't get mixed into your hand, check and make sure it has Miracle. It does not have Miracle, carry on with your life, as opposed to just like rip a card, take your turn. I get it. It's kind of just annoying to track. Hard to do.
Yep. I mean, even on Magic Online, where like that sort of thing is a little bit more automated, there is still like, if you draw a Miracle card, your opponent is going to be able to tell because there is a little pause.
Yeah.
Where you have to click, do you want to reveal this card? Yes or no?
Yeah. Do you want to actually, would you like to do this Miracle trigger? And you have to say no. Yeah, exactly. Do you know where the mechanic forecast came from, Dan?
I do, because I know at least one forecast card. It's like an Azorius Tiger or something that makes birds, I think. What set does it come from? Ooh, that's a tough one. It's one of the more unremarkable sets, I'm quite certain. Is it like Dragon's Maze or something?
Nope, it is from Dissension. It is the original Azorius mechanic. Yeah. Forecast was really weird. You had to pay a cost. It could be mana, it could be tapping stuff, it could be both, and reveal the card with Forecast from your hand, and then you get a little effect. But you had to play the ability only during your upkeep and only once each turn.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah, that was stinky.
Yeah, so like during your upkeep, you could, if you had the card you were talking about, Pride of the Clouds, you could pay 4 and reveal Pride of the Clouds from your hand to put a 1/1 white and blue bird creature token with flying into play.
Just one of them?
Just one of them.
That sucks.
It's a rare, in case you were wondering.
Well, think about the value. You get a free 1/1 for 4.
It is a white blue flyer that gets +1/+1 for each other creature in play with flying. So I guess it's like, you have one in play and then you draw the second one, and then that ability is theoretically really good to try to use, but I don't know. Not for me.
Yeah.
This seems like really low design space, really annoying, and it like feels bad to use, like you were just saying. It's just like,
totally.
Okay.
The fact that it happens in your upkeep is so indicative of like just Magic design at the time, where like now it would be like at the beginning of pre-combat main phase, or like at the beginning of your second main phase or something like that, where like you would have the option to like look at your draw for the turn or decide whether or not you want to cast it or something like that. Like just imagine you like spend your 4 mana on your upkeep to make a bird, and then you're like, oh, and there's the card I needed to game.
Yeah, exactly. How about Initiative? I mean, I don't really have anything to say about Initiative. I think it's a sick multiplayer mechanic, and like it made it is a little hard to track, I guess, even in multiplayer play, but it's obviously just it broke two player formats for a long time.
Yeah, it shouldn't have been allowed into eternal formats. It's very cool for casual EDH, like the first room, making sure that anybody who happens to like miss a land drop or something, you can be like, oh, just ping me for one and you can go get your land drop and we'll continue the game. That's awesome. Super great. The fact that you can 5 your opponent and make a skeleton and then get the best creature out of your top 10. And
yeah, exactly. It's like you can put 2+1/+1 counters on your guy and then deal 5 to them, and then you get a skeleton. It's like, hello?
So brutal. Yeah, it's such an intense clock. And it's not even just that you have to wait all the turns. The fact that it's just ETB, take the initiative, move to the next room. Just very overpowered, very understandable that cards got banned from it.
Cleave, perhaps one of the strangest mechanics of all time. Just a real clunky implementation of a... Cleave was a mechanic from the aforementioned block that you mentioned earlier, actually, Midnight Hunt. It's just a bunch of cards that have brackets on them, and if you pay the Cleave cost, you remove whatever rules text is inside of the brackets. Patrick Sullivan and Cedric Phillips talked their way through this list on their podcast, Resleevables. Unsleeved. They were talking about it on Unsleeved, and Sullivan shared an anecdote about this was toward the end of his time, like when he was working at Wizards, because he worked in design at Wizards for a while. And they were like, hey, we have this idea for a mechanic. Can you like design some like cards that kind of work like this? And like the idea is that we'll do it with brackets and stuff. And he was like, oh yeah, sure. And he came up with a bunch of different designs and blah, blah, blah. And then he moved on with his life. And he was like, surely if that mechanic ever sees the light of day, they will have found a less awkward way to have represented how they want this mechanic to work, right? And then it came out and he like died laughing and could not believe that they hadn't done that.
So
but
aesthetically
it's so
unpleasing.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, there's not a lot to say about it, but it's just like it from an aesthetic perspective, it is atrocious.
Yep.
And kind of confusing.
It is a little bit confusing.
Overall.
You have to like sit there and look at the card and be like, okay, so if I take out these words, the card does this other thing. It's like subtractive rather than additive. And the way that the cards were subtractive, some of them like made the card better and the cleave cost was more expensive, and some of them made the card worse and the cleave cost was less expensive. So it's just like, okay, what are we doing here? Number 9, Unmemorable, was just a bucket of basically, I want to say like limited keywords or whatever, just a bunch of keywords like support and related that are just like, they're not great, but they're kind of like offensive in that they're entirely forgettable or whatever, right? This is the bucket I think that I took the most umbrage with. I guess from a game design perspective, unmemorable mechanics are obviously not ideal, but I don't know. I wouldn't list them. I would maybe list them at 20 if I was going to put like my big bucket of mechanics that were just kind of forgettable or offensively forgettable because they were so milquetoast or whatever. I wouldn't put them at number 9, but that's me.
No, I feel the same way. If we're talking about like things like support or bolster or just anything that is not on this list, like, yeah, like all of these things are less offensive than Annihilator. Like,
I agree. We'll move on then to number 8, Epic. Are you familiar with Epic, Dan?
I am, yeah, from the enduring spells from my EDH past. Epic says, I believe if you cast a spell, you cannot cast spells for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and then at the beginning of each of your upkeeps, copy this spell except for its epic ability. So this is just a one cycle of cards from the much maligned Saviors of Kamigawa set. It's like a really kind of cool idea. I can get what they were kind of going for, but man, the gameplay is so bad. And like the only one that has ever actually seen any amount of play is the one that can win the game for you easily while it's going off, which is Enduring Ideal. Search your library for an enchantment card, put it onto the battlefield. But man, yeah, nothing says bad mechanic for a Magic card like a mechanic that says, hey, you can't play the game anymore.
Well, I mean, like, the idea is that they're so epic that you wouldn't need to cast another spell. Because, like, what's the blue one? It's like a bribery you get at every upkeep?
Yeah, there's a bribery that you get every upkeep.
But it's like, these spells cost, endless, like, 8 or 10 mana. And
yes, yeah.
What do you do when you're against a control deck? Like...
Yes. Yeah. I don't know.
Terrible spells. Well deserved being in the top 10.
Yeah, and I assume they also, even if it was kind of a cool thing that you could do, I imagine the actual design space for the kind of effects you would want to put Epic on is probably like next to zero.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those things where, like, the same thing with partners. Like, if you make them good at all, it's way too good. So you have to make them so bad that they're unplayable. Otherwise, They're just going to be the best thing ever.
Speaking of mechanics where the design space is, like, basically zero and the mechanic is not, like, all that great to begin with, Fateful Hour from Dark Ascension. Fateful Hour is a mechanic that just, like, gives the card an extra effect if you have 5 or less life at the time that you cast it. I think the most iconic one is maybe like
the board wipe. I can't remember any others.
I don't even remember what the board wipe does.
No, it has an art with Gideon on it in a not a secret layer, from the vault, but I don't remember what it does.
Me either.
They're terrible. It's just the worst thing in the world. Yeah,
I'm literally trying to find it, and I cannot find any cards that I remember that have Fateful Hour. There's like Gavany Ironright, which is a 3-drop 1/4 that as long as you have 5 or less life, other creatures you control have +1/+4. Okay. I think Clinging Mist is probably the one that had like the most play. It's a 3-drop fog in green. If you have 5 or less life, you get to tap all the attacking creatures, and then they don't untap. Cool, whatever. Moving on. Day-Night. Dan, Day-Night thoughts.
It's so annoying, so unnecessary. I hate anything that... I hate anything like that where I have to track outside of the game things. And yeah, just not conducive to having fun.
Yeah, I get why they wanted to like give you a solid way to track day and night, so all of the werewolves would flip at the same time, and it would make like logical sense. But man, what a bear to track. So much so that I know myself and plenty of other people where there are like great cards that they would play, but they care about the day and night mechanic, and you have to start tracking that. Terrible. Radiance. This is another quiz. Do you know what Radiance is or where it comes from?
I admit that I cheated because this was the first one that I looked at. I was like, I have never even heard of this.
Yeah, fair. Radiance, dear listener, is a really weird mechanic from Ravnica, City of Guilds, that kind of just cares about sharing colors or choosing colors. There's literally multiple different variants upon Radiance inside of the same set, which is part of the reason why it's kind of tough and bad. But it's just like, for an example, Insight Hysteria, it's a 3-drop sorcery, Radiance. Creatures that share a color with target creature can't block this turn. Okay. There are all of 10 cards where the text includes Radiance, according to Scryfall, and all of them kind of stink. I imagine the design space for this is 0. It's confusing. There's a lot of board states where you can like try to cast one of these cards and it does like nothing because your opponent only has one creature of one color or whatever. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, the design space of these, like, I'm not surprised to see more than one, like, guild-specific mechanic on this list.
Yeah,
because they're just so narrow.
The OG guild mechanics, it seems like they really missed, I think, kind of across the board. I believe 3 of the mechanics on this list were from the original guilds block. And also 2 of them were from the newest Innistrad block. So what does that say?
And if you think about like Transmute, which was the Dimir mechanic, like that was just, well, yeah, it's not great, but it's like also too good. It's not
great in that it's way too strong or it stinks and it feels bad too. It's just like, doesn't feel good to do, but it's really strong.
Mm-hmm. And necessarily, again, all the cards have to suck. Which, like, yeah, anytime you're forced to make cards that suck, it is just obviously not a great place to be for making cards for your game.
Yep. Speaking of a really small, really weird mechanic, that sucks in multiple different ways, including just feeling bad. Recover from another set that has not stood up very well to this the test of time. Cold Snap.
This and the next one I have never heard of before.
Okay, well, good news. Cold Snap. Recover. When a creature is put into your graveyard from play, you may pay a cost. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Otherwise, exile this card.
What?
So it cares about graveyard order in that, like, the first creature that goes into your graveyard, you have to make your choice right then, or else the card goes away for forever. And like, none of these cards are good. This mechanic just stinks. Nothing about it is cool. Nothing about it is fun. Just like, okay.
I have never heard of this mechanic. I'm familiar with Cold Snap, but I was thinking that like that is the cumulative upkeep set. But oh wow, yeah, look at these.
Yeah, it's just like all of the cards are overcosted and aren't like good enough, and there is one rare and like 1-2 uncommons and 2 commons. It very obviously just feels like kind of filler in this set.
Totally, yeah. It's on so few cards, and like looking at the cards too, one of them I'll just read off as Icefall, which is just a pillage effect for 1 extra mana, just 2 in red, destroy target artifact or land with recover of double red. So if you wanted to cast this and get it back, you have to have quadruple red and 2.
Yeah. Sucky. Who would ever want to do that? Not me. That's for sure.
What deck could ever support it?
Yeah.
The counter spell is 2 and 2 blue, and then the recover is 2 and 2 blue. That's 8 mana to counter a spell and buy it back. That's insane.
And to buy it back, you have to have a creature die.
Oh my god, that's wow.
That's what triggers it, is a creature being put into your graveyard from play. So a creature dying. You can't even trigger it by like milling something or something. Okay.
Well, imagine if you had like Ashnod's Altar. Now we won't get into this.
All right, let's move on to Sweep. I did not recognize Sweep either. I suppose, unshockingly, much like another thing from this set, it is from Saviors of Kamigawa. And it looks to be a very limited, just 1 card per color.
No.
I'm just reading it now. Not even 1 card per color. There's not a blue one. There's 2 white ones. There's not a green one. So these are all cards. They are all arcane spells with Sweep. Return any number of basic land type that the color of this card is to your hand, and then an effect happens. So charge across the Araba, 4 in a white, instant, arcane, sweep, return any number of planes you control to their owner's hands. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn for each planes returned this way. What? Why would you ever do that? You're stone raining yourself to get some super medium effect.
This is a 5 mana spell that asks you to put as many planes back in your hand as you can in the same set where a 4/5 flyer costs 9 mana. What could you even be attacking with to get across the damage with charge across the Araba?
You're swinging with this flyer and you're returning all 9 planes to your hands because you're playing a single color limited deck, and you're dealing a fat 13 to your opponent and conceding.
No Annihilator necessary. Holy cow.
Yeah, it's just not great. I can see why there's only like 4 of these cards. There's not even a full cycle of them.
Yeah, like you said, this is just definition filler. Like, we got to do something. We got 5 cards left. We got a Mac just floating in the air. We got to slap a mechanic on him. Let's give him Sweep.
This guy is sweeping. Dan, are you familiar with the gotcha mechanic?
Yes, only vaguely, because I know that I think this is on like the whatever the unset card is that forces your opponent to get you a soda or something like that. I don't know. Something
like that. But so this card, it is from another unset. So we're like both ends of the spectrum. We have a mechanic from an unset. Gotcha is a real important lesson, I think, that was learned in early Magic the Gathering, which is like, cards have to be fun, actually. They don't have to be fun, but they cannot actively stop interpersonal interaction in any way, shape, or form. And that's what the gacha mechanic's great at. It's from Unhinged. And all of the gacha mechanic cares about your opponent doing a specific thing, often from a weird zone that is not actually the battlefield. And then if they do or say that thing, you get like an additional mechanic. The classic one is like, stop that. It costs a single black, instant, target player discards a card. Whenever an opponent audibly flicks the card in his or her hand, you may say gotcha. If you do, return stop that from your graveyard to your hand.
Yeah, this is actually the one I know because I remember making jokes about how this would be an ultimate card in CDH if it were legal.
Oh, yes, definitely. Kill, destroy. It's destroy target non-black creature for a colorless black. Whenever an opponent says kill or destroy, you may say gotcha. If you do, return kill, destroy from your graveyard to your hand. What? Creature guy, 3/4/3/3. Whenever an opponent says creature or guy, you may say gotcha. If you do, return creature guy from your graveyard to your hand. Card Pecker. It's a 1/2/1 with flying. Gotcha. Whenever an opponent touches the table with his or her hand, you may say gotcha. If you do, return Card Pecker from your graveyard to your hand. Nothing about this is fun.
It's so bad. The counter spell is spell counter, 2 and 2 blue. Counter target spell, gotcha whenever an opponent says spell or counter.
I think the most egregious one is Laughing Hyenas. It's a 2-drop 2/2. It's a bear. Whenever an opponent laughs, you may say gotcha. If you do, return Laughing Hyena from your graveyard to your hand. Your opponent is having fun playing a game of Magic the Gathering. Joke's on you. You get a card back.
This is a bold card, too. This assumes that that your unset is going to be very funny. And then what if it's a total flop and no one ever gets anyone else with the Laughing Hyena?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Moving on to our final one.
A mechanic that has been explained to me many times and I still don't understand what it does or why.
Well, we have bands with others, which is a mechanic that is on a very few Legends cards, including a cycle of lands, Adventurer's Guildhouse, Cathedral of Sarah, Mountain Stronghold, Seafarer's Quay, Teleria, and Unholy Citadel. Or rather, remove Teleria, but they all just like, all your green legends gain bands with other legends. All your white legends gain bands with other legends. And then there's also Master of the Hunt, which has, it's a 2 green 2/2 with 2 green, put a Wolves of the Hunt token into play. Treat this token as a 1/1 green creature with the ability bands with other Wolves of the Hunt. Okay, so here is the current Oracle text for the card Adventurer's Guildhouse. If you'll,
I'm gonna go into brainstorm mode and I'm gonna really get this one.
You're gonna really pay attention. All right. Green legendary creatures you control have bands with other legendary creatures. Okay, that is the rules text. Here's the reminder text. Any legendary creatures can attack in a band as long as at least one has bands with other legendary creatures. Bands are blocked as a group if at least 2 legendary creatures you control, one of which has bands with other legendary creatures, are blocking or being blocked by the same creature. You divide that creature's combat damage, not its controller, among any of the creatures it's being blocked by or is blocking.
So it makes blocking really terrible, it sounds like.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
That's it. That's all it does. And there was a period of the time in the rules where this mechanic did not work as well.
Yes.
At all.
That is something that I didn't know about this.
I believe it just started working, like, again. When they changed how the blocking rules worked again.
Yeah. That makes sense because that's what I was thinking this whole time is like, this is very antithetical to how doling blocking out combat, combat damage and everything works.
Yeah. So I believe with the most recent blocking changes, this mechanic started working again, but don't quote me on that. That is our worst mechanic of all time. Bands with others. And you know what? I believe it. It barely worked for a very long time.
It's been notoriously trashed upon for its entire existence. I mean, pretty much the entire existence of the game at this point.
Well, like, the mechanic banding was bad enough, and this is just, like, more restrictive banding is specifically what it is. That's just so silly.
And again, the idea that you're banding with other legends, you have one of your, like, 8 mana 5/4s with no abilities. You have your Lady of the Mountain, and you're going to band that with, I can't name another green legend.
Yava. Yuriko. Never mind.
Banding my Lady of the Mountain with Yuriko. But all right. Very stinky.
Those are the top 20 worst mechanics of all time. Unshockingly, we managed to talk about them for like 40 minutes. So
I know, you were like, we could go through each one of them. And I was like, no, we won't. That'll take too much time. And then we did.
Well, that's all the time we've got for that. Dan, you been thinking about anything recently? You got anything going on? This is where the co-host Notebook would be if this is a normal episode, but we're just vibing.
Okay, yeah, I felt like I was on the spot with you. Been thinking about anything recently? Me and my underwear. Thinking about myself in my underwear.
I am picturing what I saw when I woke up this morning. Blah.
That's what you do. You like walk up to the full length mirror and you're like, get a good up and down of me in the underwear. No, it's Thanksgiving week. I'm going to be doing some traveling tomorrow. I think I'm going to be hitting the road. So looking forward to a little bit of vacation time. Going to be try to spend as much time on the couch playing Echoes of Wisdom as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that sounds like a great time, you know?
I'm sure it does. What about you? What are you getting up to?
Just going home. Going home for the holiday.
Parent time?
Yep, going up to my parents' place, hanging out for a few days. Both of my brothers and both of my sister-in-laws will be around, and it'll be nice, especially like my middle brother I haven't seen in a bit because he lives farther away and has to work a lot, so he doesn't get to come out as much as my youngest brother does. So should be a good time.
Yeah, that'll be nice. I'm hoping to make it up to the mountain region in my home state and see some foliage while I'm up there.
Very nice. A classic. Yeah. I will probably not be seeing any foliage or touching any grass while I am up visiting my parents. But, you know, such is life.
I'm going to drive for 10 hours, and the idea of driving like 2 more to go see the mountains might be a little bit daunting by the time it actually gets time to do it. So we'll see if I get to it either. Yeah. Well, Dan, do you have anything else to leave our listeners with before we go? It's getting colder outside, so, you know, if you got people in your community who are living on the street, do what you can to help them out. That can go as far as, like, giving people money or, like, donating time at your local soup kitchen or shelter and stuff like that. So, yeah, consider donating some of your time to people who need it. Thanks for listening, everyone. Up next, we have an excellent interview. I hope you enjoy it. Bye-bye. Bye. Hey there. Thanks for listening to this podcast episode. If you want to help support the podcast, check out our Patreon. You'll get a sticker in the mail and access to our Patreon exclusive content, which I'm always cooking up more of every day. We've got bonus questions with guests, exclusive interviews, me thought dumping about magic in my life. What else could you want? Plus, when we read letters to the editors, those sent through Patreon DMs or the Discord get first priority. Yep, we have a Discord that you'll be thrown into. Come talk to me about professional wrestling. Anyways, without any further ado, let's get back into this episode. And welcome back to the Herald's Horn. Today I am joined by a wonderful guest, and that is Carmen. Welcome, Carmen, to the Herald's Horn.
Howdy! How's it going? Good show?
Oh, thank you. It's great to have you here. I'm excited. You're the first ever WotC staff on the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay, first ever WotC staff.
Well,
okay, there you go. Congrats.
We'll blow the doors off, hopefully meet expectations.
So, Carmen, you are here to talk about a bit about Foundations. You were on the Foundations team, right?
Yes. So,
in what capacity?
I was on Foundations basically from conception, 2 pencils down. I was in a lot of the first meetings talking about what mechanics were going to go into it, kind of some of the philosophy driving the format. I'm not going to try and take credit for like the big vision for what it could be. That was something that I got brought in a little bit after they decided kind of what the product would look like. But I had some sway in like the starter collection, which I ended up leading. I was the strong second on the main set, and I was the lead for developing the limited format.
Carmen, for those of us who haven't listened to 1,000 episodes of Drive to Work, can you explain what a strong second is?
Yeah, sure. So the strong second is basically not so every set has a game design lead. So that is the person ultimately making all of the final calls on things. The strong second is the person who works closely enough with them often enough and has a good enough idea of what they're trying to do that they are able to act in the lead's stead whenever the lead isn't around. And generally the lead will trust them to make calls in like FFL meetings when cards are being developed for standard, or a lot of developing the limited format. For example, I would go through all of the feedback and then send Brian a list of like 10 changes and 3 macro notes, and just be like, hey, are these cool? And it was usually him giving me 8 yeses, 1, are you sure about this? And 1, I actually think I would rather not change this card that way. And that's the, the long summary of it.
Yeah. And then lead on the development side of limited, and then design is a lot more like, oh, here are some really cool ideas that would be fun. And then development is more so, okay, let's turn these fun Magic cards into cards that work, right? A little more of the adjusting the mana cost, adjusting the power toughness, raising concerns. Is that more of like what that side of it is?
Yeah, I ended up doing a lot of development on the whole set, but on Limited in particular, I was making a lot of the final calls for, like, ultimately, Brian Hawley, the game design lead for the product umbrella, had the final say on if I was going to do something. Just asterisk, he's like, no, we're not going to do that. We have, every card has a bunch of different pressures pushing it in different directions, and it's kind of the lead's decision to reconcile all of that to figure out what the most important direction to go is. But leading limited means that it fell on me to reconcile all of the limited feedback that we got throughout the process and make sure that different colors were at least close to the same strength as one another. And I think I maybe could have done a better job on some of it, but given that there were...
Hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah. And there's some of it where the overarching feeling that you're trying to get is going to translate pretty differently from the limited format sometimes. So some of it I feel fine about. Like, I think green is like a little bit too weak in limited, for example, but I think most of the cards are resonant or things that skin into Commander or something like that. Like, I think we'll touch on it a bit later, but like Elfsworn Giant is a riff on the card Spore Mound, which is a really popular card in Commander, even though it's not the most strong card in Limited because it's a 5-mana card that asks you to keep playing more lands, which is a little tough.
There's a really big difference in between 5 and 6 and 7 lands.
Right, exactly. So you just run into spots where it's like, okay, this card is probably going to be main green is a little bit under where we'd like it to be in Limited, but this is a really cool card to get to exist, and this is what making those cards looks like.
Definitely. Well, man, I didn't know you were that involved all the way through. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, there was a lot of it. I feel really good about my involvement in some of it. Like, I pushed really hard to get the raid mechanic in. So something I did before I worked for Wizards of the Coast is I was a coach in Magic for a long time alongside being a pro player. And so I have a lot of experience helping people level up their game in the literal sense, but trying to find ways to organically insert teaching moments where no one has to tell you what to do. You just kind of develop your own muscle memory, was really important to me on what's meant to be an introductory product, but also a product that gets you from new Magic player to just a Magic player. And Raid, for example, is one that teaches you to look for attacks more often. And then also it teaches you to cast your creatures post-combat, which I think is one of the harder lessons to learn when you're a new player.
Quote-unquote ideal things to do.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's all correct stuff to do. There's some like cards that I love, like Noble Hierarch, that are like, I think reinforce bad habits, even if the card's really fun, where it's like,
cast me before, so you can get
cast
the Exalted
combat
trigger.
and only attack with one creature is usually not what you want to be doing.
That's the greatest learning lesson.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, it's not to say that those are the only cards that should exist, but for when trying to figure out the most optimal version of teaching players how to become bona fide Magic players that are just regulars at the LGS, finding those sorts of things, or Landfall is an example of another one where it's like, get players to put more lands in their decks. Mm-hmm. Great, yeah, because cool. We all know new players are just like, 20 lands.
I hope.
Yeah, but
I was at a Foundations pre-release, Carmen, and the two guys who were sitting like next to me doing their deck building thing. They were both newer players. Mm-hmm. They looked at the insert, they set it aside, and they were both like, yeah, I feel good with 13. I was like, guys,
right.
let me interrupt you here in the middle of your deck building.
There's no shade. Like, 17. Even our game didn't, like, the pros in our game didn't play enough lands in the early part. It's really hard. So finding ways to teach people or, like, trick them into, like, it actually felt great that I hit my first
lands
5
are just so boring. They're not my cards.
Literally. They're like, Forest is less cool than Llanowar Elves, even though they kind of do the same thing.
But Llanowar Elves says on it that I get to put a Forest into play.
I did that when I was newer.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you said it, right? It's like, the only people who say that are people who, like, did it at one point.
All right, so I guess we could shift a little bit into Carmen story time, and talk about. So listeners, I've prepared a list of 6 cards that I really enjoy, from the enjoy or have some questions about, but mainly enjoy from the Foundations card lists, the quite large Foundations card lists. It's a larger than normal set, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on here where there are basically 3 core products that are contributing to Standard. There's also Jumpstart Foundations, which is not Standard legal, and it's just a cool product. There's the Beginner Box, which is the sort of starter, or the very first introductory. There's a scripted tutorial sequence with 10 Jumpstart-esque packets that you can shuffle together and learn with. And if you decide Jumpstart's all you want to do, you can go to Jumpstart Foundations. If you want to get more into deck building, the next step on the path is the starter collection. So that is the product I alluded to earlier that I led, that has a bunch of cards that are exclusive to it that are kind of just iconic Magic cards to build decks with. So much of the goal of that one was to emulate the sort of shoebox that all of us had someone just shove at us when we were younger and go, hey, build something out of this. And those of us that made it here probably fell in love with something, and I wanted to try and get a box with as many different things someone could fall in love with as possible. Just show you what's cool about Magic. Stuff like Pyromancer's Goggles, Mystical Teachings, Darksteel Colossus, Maelstrom Pulse, Mazes In. There are a couple
I've won some standard games with that already, Carmen. This is all your fault.
Cool.
This is all your fault.
It has Demonic Pact and Harmless Offering in it. So it's another one of those teaching moments where you see Harmless Offering and, pardon my French, but you're just like, why would I do that? Like,
yeah.
I don't want to give them something.
Ever give someone anything? Yeah.
Right, but then you see this card that says you lose the game on it, and it's just like hamster wheel running. And trying to give players those moments to learn things is one of the things that keeps all of us coming back to Magic after 30 years now, or whatever it is. And finally, there is the actual main set, which is just a full bona fide Magic set from top to bottom. Special guests, booster fun, the whole 9 yards.
I'm really happy that you put the Demonic Pact and Harmless Offering into the set, because it's a great learning lesson and kind of fun moment for new players, and it also lets people like me who have been around long enough to have played that deck in Standard and lost a lot trying to do it a chance to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. There's so many cool cards that are in this weird what I call the hell zone of, like, they're not quite strong enough to really want to be like front list Magic thing, because they're not that as exciting as they used to be, but they're probably too strong for limited, right? Demonic Pact is one that is just a really messed up, like, uncommon. But they're really cool cards, and people do love playing with them, like Mazes In and Demonic Pact. So having something like this to just be like, yo, look, Magic's kind of awesome. Here are some cards that are more aspirational than they are strong, was exactly the target I was trying to hit.
It makes a lot of sense. Well, okay. jumping into our 6 cards, maybe we can talk about a card that's a little more aspirational than it is strong. It's our first reprint, originally from Chronicles, last seen on the time-shifted sheet long ago in Time Spiral. Carmen, why the heck is Feldon's Cane in this set? Feldon's Cane, for the listeners, if you don't know, I know, you're so offended by this question.
No, I'm not offended.
Okay,
I'm stoked.
excellent. Okay, you were like, how dare he ask me
I'm
why this
excited.
is okay.
I love this card.
Yes. Okay, so for listeners at home who don't know what Feldon's Cane is, perhaps you haven't been playing since Time Spiral, or it is a 1-drop artifact. You tap it, you exile it, and then you get to shuffle your graveyard into your library. Carmen, what's going on with Feldon's Cane? What are we doing here?
So something I drew on a lot when working on this product was my time as a new player and my time as like a pretty weak player, if I'm being honest. So I think I am lucky in that I've put a lot of work into becoming strong at Magic, and I made it to where I am today, and so everyone just sees who I am today. But the first 10 years or something that I played Magic, I was the knucklehead in the back playing mono white life gain or mono green tree folk during fairy standard and stuff, going like 1 and 4 every FNM, hoping to put 2 timber protectors on the battlefield. And so a lot of times I would channel, okay, what were the things that I thought were awful or that I think other new players think are awful and really, really unfun to lose to? And I wanted to give people tools to beat those things. So in this case, Mill is one of those things that I think evokes a stronger emotional reaction than anything. But when you do lose to it, you're just like, this is dumb. This is awful.
My cards are in my graveyard. I didn't even get to use them. This stinks.
This is so unfun. So giving players a few hammers to be able to just be like, okay, you are tired of losing to your friend's mill deck. Here's a way you will never lose to your friend's mill deck. There's like a couple of anti-counterspell cards in there. Wilt Leaf Liege is a reprint in there that's an anti-discard card. Just really trying to find the things that are like, what's unfun about Magic, and how do I make sure new players feel like there is a Magic card they can reach for to beat that strategy?
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And this is also, I think, like where my mind immediately goes for something like that is like, Gaia's Blessing, Gaia's Protection. I forget the name of the spell. Carmen, I rely upon you
Gaia's
to be the encyclopedia. I did it.
Yeah, you
rely
did
upon you to be the Magic encyclopedia for today. That I know you are.
There's some of the words.
Feldon's Cane is 1 colorless mana. Anyone can play it.
Right. It also strikes a really fun balance of not being much of a standard risk. Not that the card is awful. Like if Mill ends up being a thing, it might show up.
You can play Feldon's Cane, yeah.
Right. But something like Elixir of Immortality actually has a pedigree of being like, oh,
miserable.
Great, no win con blue-white control.
Yes, exactly.
That's a real standard deck. And
we don't
one of the
like that, yeah.
Right, we don't want that to be legal for 5 years because then we have to balance around it for 5 or more years, right? So finding ways that you can answer those things without also incurring a bunch of standard risk was one of the big challenges of the set. We even ended up commissioning new art for this one to make sure that it looked like a modern Magic card. Ari Zarilnik had a lot of fun, and Don Mirren had a lot of fun working on the art direction for that one.
Oh, I'm sure. It is a very cool new art. I didn't even think about the fact that it had new art. Mm-hmm. Well, I do like the old art, though. Classic Mark.
Me too. But, I mean, I'm one of the retro frame people who just hunts that stuff out, so...
Yeah, I love the new art on this one, and, giving, the new FNM player... A great, little 2 of in their sideboard to have, or, even a, kitchen table player who has not been around Magic, doesn't know this card exists. They can crack this open and they can be like, finally, my long national nightmare is over.
I mean, it's also the kind of card, like, it's like the players who, like, put the forest into play with the Llanowar Elves. Tell me honestly, the first time you saw Feldon's Cane, it wasn't one of those moments of, like, a card can just do that?
Yeah.
For 1 mana?
Exactly.
Are you serious right now? Like, I think it looks really cool.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And it is like one of those things, if you're in the mind state of, the cards in my graveyard are gone forever, I will never have the chance to use them ever again. Aha, now I can.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this was like one of the attempts to make sure that we were giving players like real Magic and not like some sort of diet Magic the Gathering or something like that. I think I worked at an LGS back in the day, and one of the worst feelings was when someone would come in, they're a new Magic player, they buy like a couple intro decks or Planeswalker decks or whatever, and they go, "This is sick. Can I play these at FNM?" And you're like, "Well, technically, champ, but it's time to graduate to real Magic cards now.
Let me introduce you to this." Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to make sure that in the start of the collection in particular, that players could take those cards and be like, "Oh, I fell in love with Lyra Dawnbringer. Can I play this at FNM?" And the person at the shop's just like, "Oh, yeah. I remember playing Lyra in my standard decks. You should definitely do that." Or Aurelia or whatever it is. You know,
Let's look at all the other great angels that you can give +1/+1.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So if we're talking about cards that were for newer players, I think the next card up on the list is maybe a card that maybe was a little bit more for some of the spikes of the world. That's my read of the situation anyways. It's a new card. It's a red sorcery. It deals 3 damage to each opponent. It's Boltwave.
Yep, Boltwave rules.
We brought back Lava Spike.
But no arcane.
No arcane. And for those commander players out there, for those 2-headed giant pre-release events, it hits each opponent. We did it.
So this one was actually not for the spikes.
Okay, fair enough.
This one was for newer players, where I know one of the worst parts of being a new player is realizing how much you have to work to collect mana bases. Right, so you go online, you look up some decks, and you're like, "Oh, these 3-color decks look cool and strong right now. Oh, wait." And then you realize that you're going to spend weeks collecting Shocklands or Painlands or I guess Verges or the thing right now. It just like whatever the big thing is. And so seeding a strong monocolor-ish or monocolor with a splash deck was one of the things that I really wanted to try and have one of in Foundations. I really wanted to put emphasis on monocolor decks in particular, because newer players are just going to be like, "Great, I can go collect all the spells that I think are cool, and I can go to FNM, and I could probably win a few games." I think Burn right now is doing okay in Standard, but it's not dominating or anything. And so having that way for new players to actually get a seat at the table and not just politely go 2-3 at FNM or whatever every week was something that was pretty important to me throughout the process. And Burn was one of the things that is historically somewhat strong, but given that it's so linear, as long as play design, which I am a part of, is doing their job to make sure there's adequate counterplay to stuff like Burn, it's something that we can prepare for in a much more controlled and predictable way than some other open-ended archetypes. Like Mono Blue Flash is something we kind of seeded in there as well, but we didn't give it all the tools because so many different things can go into that deck that we want to have a little bit more control over what tools they're fighting with. Whereas Burn, it kind of faces the place. We know what those cards are going to look like, and when we want to make counterplay, we know what kind of cards we're trying to fight against.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. A strong monocolor card, Boltwave. Yeah, I can see the vision. I can see where you're coming from with that one. Shows what I know, thinking it's all about the spikes, getting a new lava spike.
Well, I thought it was a pun.
Look, all Magic cards serve multiple audiences. It's a pun?
It was for the spikes, the lava spikes.
You're right.
Oh my, don't you deep sigh as if that was an accident. I do not believe you.
You're right, Carmen. I'm a comedic genius. You got me.
I know.
You got me.
I'm telling everyone this. Write it down. Everyone watching knows. Callahan Jones, comedic genius.
Don't write that down. Don't do it. The expectations are too high.
We're going to put it up in lights.
MagicCon Chicago. Everyone walks in. Callahan Jones, comedic genius, massive
House
banner.
of Blues.
Can we reach out to Reed Pop about that, please? I gotta say, I'm really happy that y'all put Boltwave into this set, because I am very personally biased, and I love it when burn cards are strong in Standard, because that means that my wife is 95% more likely to get back into Standard.
And I cannot stress enough, that is the goal. It literally just makes Magic more accessible to have a sort of linear way to go hang out with your friends and play Magic and feel like you're playing the same game as them. Like, to the 9,000 IQ players that spend a ton of time thinking about Magic all the time, it's a little repetitive and boring. To some people who just want to play some cards and hang out with their friends, Burn rule.
Love to draw a card and say, hey, this does 3 damage to my opponent. Hey, this will trigger prowess on my Monastery Swiftspear that is still in Standard. Get ya!
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Carmen, for Boltwave. Thank you, Matt, Wizards of the Coast, for Boltwave.
I can't take credit. That one is Brian Holly's design originally.
Thank you, Brian Holly.
Yeah. Shout out.
Okay, I guess we can move on to another old card. It's a card we've already referenced like 8 times on this podcast. It's one of my favorite Magic cards of all time that I am so happy and, from an outsider's perspective, mildly concerned about being Standard legal for so long. It is Llanowar Elves. Single green, tap, add a green, a 1/1. Card is very strong. Card is very fun.
Right. This is one where one of the things that we kind of repeat so often that I think it is almost lost on people, where it's just like, all right, we want to make the fun cards strong, and we want to make sure the strong cards are fun. Llanowar Elves is one of those cards that, if it is, I think a lot of people worry, oh, this is going to be too strong, and so on. One of the nice things about Llanowar Elves, it's pretty fun to be strong. It was legal for like 20 years straight, and people had a pretty good time with it.
That's fair.
Don't get me wrong, like 3-drops have become more punishing in the time since then, so none of this is to say that people who are worried are wrong for being worried. I'm somewhat worried. But one of the things that is also important about Llanowar Elves, as opposed to Monastery Swiftspear, which was originally in Foundations, because it's a 1-mana French vanilla, it looks great for a sort of introductory core set thing. Llanowar Elf decks don't always look the same, right? Whereas Monastery Swiftspear decks don't literally look the same, but like...
There will be 4 Monastery Swiftspear, and there will be 4 Key2 Lava Runner, and there will be 4 Boltwave, and
right, like, you play on turn 1, someone casts a Monastery of Swiftspear, you probably know what their whole deck is about.
Yeah, definitely.
Llanowar Elves, on the other hand, they cast this on turn 1. At one point in Standard, it was probably Stomping Ground, and you knew it was Domri Raid coming next. At one point, it was Razorverge Thicket, and then Birthing Pod coming next. At one point, it was, I don't know, some other land helping you cast Rock's Warmonk with a Pain land or something like that. Like, the deck can look, at one point it was Jadelight Ranger. Like, Llanowar Elf decks look different over time. So it's actually a pretty great card to place a bet on, because it still allows the rest of the metagame to churn around it, even if it is sort of like a natural center for players to kind of have to know how to play against to engage with Standard.
So to say, the last time I think I cast Llanowar Elves in Standard, I was casting a Steel Leaf Champion on turn 2.
Great.
Great. 5/4. Let's go. So Llanowar Elves, it's here. And it's got the new it's not new art. It's got the Kev Walker art, the return of the Kev Walker art. I'm a big fan of that one.
Yeah, I really, really am glad we were able to get that artwork.
So you would say the point of putting Llanowar Elves into Foundations was pretty much to give people something really cool that is really strong, but it's also maybe unlike how Boltwave is very strong in its own way. Llanowar Elves is strong in a very flexible way. It gives you a very open-ended strong card to play with.
Right, exactly. So I would even guess that Llanowar Elves is stronger than Boltwave, but it is stronger in more fun ways, or like you said, more versatile or flexible ways.
You get to cast your 3-drop, you can power out a 5-drop. Pretty much your only constraint is that you have to not, it can't cast a blue spell. It can't cast your Tempest Jit or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Man, I'm just ripping out every single Dominaria rare today.
Hey, Tempest Jit is in the starter collection. I do know that one.
That's another card that I would love to cast from the starter collection.
That card's really nice. I built.
Awesome.
We do Standard Night here at Wizards, and they gave me. I was like, hey, if you give me for starter collections, I will build like 5 loner decks, and you can just keep them on the shelf. And I actually went and played the Boros Angels deck that I built just a couple nights ago at the inaugural standard night for it, and I had a pretty good time.
I would hope so.
There's something just really satisfying about going Lyra Aurelia kill you.
God. Just, okay, I'm going to play this really good 2-drop. What are you going to do about it? Nothing? Okay, you lose.
Yep.
All right, Carmen, moving on past the lowly Llanowar Elves. Perhaps a new card. Lowly. Look, he's I imagine Llanowar Elf is short.
Whatever you mean, bud. Whatever you mean. That's someone who sits across from Llanowar Elves and is salty about it and be like, the lowly Llanowar Elves.
That card stinks. Why would you even play that card?
You
wouldn't have won if I had removal for your Llanowar Elf.
Yeah, you won because I didn't draw Burst Lightning.
Yeah, I didn't have Shaka in time to remove your Llanowar Elf. Perhaps let's move on to a card that perhaps a lot of people may in the coming future be casting with the help of Llanowar Elves, because it is a 7-drop. It's a 7/7. It has First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink, and Ward. Pay 7 life. Carmen, what's the story with Sire of 7 Deaths?
I love this card.
Everyone's Ward Coil replacement.
So it's a replacement? I don't even know if
think
it's
so.
Wrong. Okay, listen, maybe.
I like that it costs 7 mana rather than 6 mana, personally.
Yeah, it is way more
reasons.
satisfying. Way more satisfying.
I don't like having to have an extra mana hanging around to be pumped up.
Yeah, if you like to count
into
to
my
7.
chromatic sphere, you know?
Right,
Yes.
of course. So we were asked by Creative, there were some things that in Foundations, creatively, they wanted to try and get a vertical slice of Magic to kind of give you an idea of all the different planes, a bunch of different characters. Similar to earlier, we talked a lot about, hey, this is what is possible with the game design of Magic. Creative also kind of wanted to show what is cool about Magic's worlds.
Yeah, all of their different planes and whatnot. Yeah.
Right. So they were like, hey, could you maybe try and get a Phyrexian and like an Eldrazi in there and make them cool so people know kind of what's going on. They didn't want us to use legendary creatures. So it would be weird to put like 1 Eldrazi Titan, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
like, here's what Emmy has been up to this whole time.
Right, and will be up to the whole time, I guess. So we were like, great, we should probably just make a really big Eldrazi. That sounds like it should be a mythic rare. And the lead goes, what does it do? And I was just like, I don't know, what if it's just like 2024 Acroma and it's just like big and awesome and the whole thing is that it is scary and looming over the game. That feels like an Eldrazi to me. And he goes, I don't really know. Do French Vanillas cut it anymore? And I was just like, 7 mana, 7 power, 7 toughness, 7 keywords.
This is a real French Vanilla.
Right, yeah. And he was just like, okay, let's see how it goes. And like,
see how it works,
he goes, but which 7? And the only difference between what we ended up making and what's on the card is instead of Ward 7 life, I had haste.
Oh, sure.
Which was too strong.
Yeah, this card with first strike, my favorite mechanic of all time. First strike, vigilance, menace, trample, reach, lifelink. If you untap with this card, you're probably already like never losing a game. And why, might as well give someone 2 main phases with which to decide how they want to deal with this rather than immediately taking 7 and your opponent gaining 7 life, etc., etc. Yeah. Right.
There was some degree where it was, I think it is the kind of card that will just be like the bane of kitchen tables.
Which, for sure.
In some ways, I kind of think is content. Like, some cards are just going to do that. So I think it being an Eldrazi is really flavorful.
Very thematic, yes. And I think that, if someone makes it to 7 mana, like we were talking about earlier, there's a big difference in between 5, 6, and 7 lands in play, especially if you aren't getting much help on the ramping side of things. I think if you pay 7 mana for a spell, that should probably just be able to end the game.
Game's got to end. Game's got to end.
Game's gotta end. No, my game has to go on for forever. Never ends. I love the Sire of Seven Deaths. This card makes me so happy. Both, I do, from a player perspective, I feel like there has been a while since I've seen like a draw dropping, very cool non-legendary Eldrazi card. And also it has been a while since we have gotten, it's very obvious that y'all have put in a little bit of fun and work to make a card very, the phrase has left my brain.
Thematic?
Symmetrical.
Symmetrical. Great.
Symmetrical. Ever since the whiff of Gristlebrand, Wizards of the Coast has obviously been doing a lot of work to make sure the symmetrical cards are aesthetically symmetrical. Yeah.
Yep, that was when everyone had a lot of fun with. So one of the things I loved doing on this set was I worked pretty closely with a lot of the art stuff on it, where I didn't do a lot. Obviously, I didn't draw anything, and obviously I drew some cards, but I didn't illustrate anything. But
all right, replace my banner. Magic's funniest person. It's
I'm
Carmen.
Opening. I'm opening. It's fine. I'm gonna warm the crowd up. I'm gonna come out and hit them with the. All right, gamers. Callahan Jones in the house tonight. Callahan, hey, tip your waitress. But no, working in like top landing and just speaking a lot to we care a lot that this design is going to be a wolf that's pouncing out of the woods. That is what we care a lot about. Y'all figure out where you want it, how you want it to work, but we really want this to be a wolf just pouncing out of the woods. And you can see 3 mana flash wolf is what that is. So Sire of Seven Deaths is one that in all the top landing meetings I was just biblically accurate Eldrazi. Just whatever that means.
Absolutely,
just make it
insane,
weird and abstract and cool. And they were just we have just the thing. We're gonna do this. And then even frames the full art version is just 7 lines where they even changed how they kern Magic cards for it to be more delightful. I don't know. It's so cool.
Yeah, I love everything about this card, aesthetically and otherwise. I'll be putting this into my silly Magic the Gathering decks, that's for sure. And every time I'll say, oh yeah, I'm going to cast a 7-drop, and they're going to be like, I lose. You're right. You do lose. You lose to my Sire of the Seven Depths. That's the dream. Because I've been playing Sire. Exactly. And I really appreciate, this is the card on the list that I am interested about Feldon's Cane as to what you guys were thinking when you decided to put it into the set, and cards like Boltwave I'm interested in because why would y'all decide to kind of rework a classic burn card and bring it into the modern era? Llanowar Elves, what are we doing with Llanowar Elves? So even the rest of my cards besides this one are much more I've been playing Magic for the Gathering for a long time, and therefore I'm going to think about why this is here. Sire of the Seven Deaths has warmed up my decade plus hyper obsessed with Magic player's heart. Just grew one size. Sire of the Seven Depths has grown my decade plus Magic player heart one size this day. So I just wanted to shout that out. If we can move on to our final reprint card here, that is a card that you actually have already mentioned the archetype that it belongs to. A very obvious seed for me to hopefully get to play one of my favorite standard archetypes that I've gotten to play in the past. Once again, Brineborn Cutthroat, 1 in a blue. It's a Merfolk Pirate, has flash, and whenever I cast a spell during an opponent's turn, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on my Brineborn Cutthroat, and it's already a 2/1. What's up with Brineborn Cutthroat? What are we doing here?
It's just a lot of fun. It's the kind of thing where it's really directional and telling you to build a certain kind of deck, which is something where we think. I was worried that in the starter collection it could be overwhelming looking at 300 cards or something to try and go, okay, what the hell exactly am I supposed to do with this? So I tried to make most of the cards be somewhat directional and just be like, hey, you probably want to be casting spells on your opponent's turn. Or Lyra, you probably want to fill your deck with angels. Or I think Regal Caracal is in there. And that one is hey, fill your deck with cats. You're going to have a pretty good time if you do that. And so kind of hinting at the ways that you could build decks was something really important to me. And then Brineborn Cutthroat also fulfilled the thing I described previously about being a draw to a strong monocolor deck. I know on Arena in particular, Brineborn Cutthroat is one that I have played against a ton in my life. So I think it is somewhat base level appealing. It's just really satisfying to play with, where it does give you that sort of inevitability on top of you getting to spin your wheels with opts or protection spells or unsummons or whatever.
And then I get a big dumb guy.
Yeah,
in the end,
it's cool.
Cast my opt, my guy gets bigger and dumber. What else could I need in a game of Magic
Blue
the Gathering?
is also bad at that. There are not
know.
very many cards that can go in this product where you get a blue creature that is bigger than like a 3/4.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Which is also why I love Tempest Gen so much. These two cards work very well together.
Wow.
How crazy. Wait, were these two
my
cards
God.
ever in a standard deck before that was very popular and quite decent?
I wonder, I think one of my best friends won a Pro Tour with it or something. It's like, I might be a little biased. It's
Carmen slowly reconstructing all of her best friends' PT winning standard decks.
Well, it's like a weird thing, right? Where it's just like, I don't know, why do you think they ended up on those decks? And then also saw them be popular, and it was really cool to go to like PTQs and see people who were just like, I don't know, I was able to get all of these cards pretty easily from the shop, so I decided to come play in the RCQ, and that was sweet.
I did just frantically search up Curious Obsession to make sure that it hadn't slipped through my radar. No Curious Obsession. Probably will never see that card again. A little too good.
I mean, I don't think it is impossible. I would guess it would be, I think, if I had the keys to the castle, I would probably just want to print Fixed Curiosity, but I don't know if that one's ever going to happen.
Well, Enduring Curiosity already seems quite good enough for the standard format.
That card's really nice. That
card is really good.
That card is a banger. That card's so nice.
All right, that's my Brineborn Cutthroat is my pick of the set. That's right up. That's my alley. That's my alley. My favorite uncommon for sure.
I'm glad to get confirmation. It was Merfolk Trickster for a long time, and so that was like a tough God. Which of these am I supposed to go with? So
I think that having a big dumb idiot that rewards me for casting my opt is a little more fun than me second guessing which Merfolk Trickster decision I made for the entire rest of the night. Yeah.
I totally agree. It was definitely one where I ended up going, all right, in my heart of hearts, I think Brineborn Cutthroat is a little weaker and a little more fun. And I want this to be fun.
Would I also love to cast Merfolk Trickster? Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but...
Right.
All right, Carmen, let's move on to this final card here on our list. It is a card that I know that you have a pretty fun story about. It's Elfsworn Giant. Can you tell us the story behind this nice little 5-drop, 5/3 reach?
Yeah, so this is one that, as you started on, it's 5 mana, 5/3 reach, landfall, make a 1/1 elf token. So originally the set had Spore Mound in this slot, and that card was a lot too weak for limited.
What does Spore Mound do?
Spore Mound is 3GG, 3/3, I think it's out of M14, and then it is landfall, make a 1/1 Saproling.
Right on all counts. Down to the M14.
So this is one that is really popular in Commander. Like, landfall, make a token is just a fun thing to do, right? Landfall is one of those really fun mechanics that, I don't know, it's on my short list of funnest mechanics of all time because it
rewards us for playing Magic.
But the big thing is that it makes every single card in your deck fun to draw. Like, normally you get to the mid game, especially like turn 5, you're going, God, please just give me a spell. Oh my God, please. But you draw a land and you go, damn. Oh, actually, my card does something, so this is pretty good for me.
My landfall says, yeah.
Right. So it's a really, really fun card, even if it's not that strong. The problem is it was way too weak. And working on developing limited, it is my job to make sure that things aren't too far off, right? There are trade-offs that we talked about a little bit earlier, and there is something where if something is bordering on unplayable in limited, then you probably need to hit the drawing board.
Unless it, like, you know, was a rare that was specifically meant for such and such a case. It's a little different when it's like a common.
Right. And not to get too much into how the sausage is made, but generally we will get art for sets in waves, right? We'll get, you know, half the set or a third of the set or something, and then the next third or the second half or something. And then after that, it's like, okay, this is all the art you get for the set. That's just how the things are structured. So we identified Spore Mound was way too weak after art waves were done. So I went through what we call slush art. This is art that kind of missed the mark. Either maybe a product ended up not getting made after the art was commissioned, or something got replaced by a reprint late in development. There are a lot of reasons that something might not quite be correct. I did a decent amount of spelunking through slush art on this one because the timelines on it ended up being a little wonky. And Elfsworn Giant was one I found from 2006 was when it was actually originally commissioned. So we're talking 18-year-old piece of art or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was so stoked to find this because this was actually when I was still kind of a newer player. I started in 2003, and a lot of the first cards I played with my best friend at the time, Randy, who they taught me to play Magic, and they had an elf deck built around Well-Wisher that was total garbage. I hated playing against it. They would gain 900 life every game, and it was the worst, and it wasn't garbage. I mean, it wasn't Ravager Affinity, which was the strongest thing at the time, but it was a card that was great at beating the hell out of me. And so getting to sort of actually design a brand new card around this art where it's like, oh, I have a deeply normal and spicy brain that is good at identifying patterns, and was like, oh, are those the trees on the Timberwatch cards? I think I can justify this making elf tokens.
Yeah, because Dave did all of the some of those cards.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Wirewood, not Timberwatch, excuse me. But anyway.
Well, he did do Timberwatch Elf.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Fun little coinky dig. So I end up looking into it and I'm like, oh, we could justify this making elf tokens. Okay. And also I can give it reach, which was one of the problems of green in the set. And we ended up at the very last second. The design I worked really close with, Chris Gabartek, who had kind of championed, like, I get Spore Mound's a fun card. It really, really is way too weak, though. So finding ways to work with him, it was awesome in that it kind of was a bunch of teams coming together to collaborate on making a last second card. And then also there was the sort of personal angle to it, where in a lot of ways it kind of felt like making a card that I would have loved when I was younger, that, like, I can't quite retcon into my old memories, but in some ways it really felt like it hit the mark of, like, all right, make Magic cards that feel like they already exist because they're that organic. You just look at it and you just go, oh, what was this in originally? And you're like, that's a new card, pal. So I don't know. I try not to do this too much, but I take a lot of pride in that one, and really it brings me a lot of joy to have gotten to just bring all those things together to make that card happen.
In the last moment.
Yeah, legitimately, I think that card was made with, like, a week or less before we were pencils down. Yeah.
Yep. Which, like, and to what you alluded to earlier, it is, like, still a little bit weak, even if you compare it to, like, even some of the other, 5-drop commons in the set. Icewind Elemental versus Elfsworn Giant. Well, Icewind Elemental's a pretty damn strong card or whatever.
Yep,
but
sure is.
I guess when you have a week left, there's you err on the side of giving it a 3 toughness rather than 4 toughness or whatever.
We wanted to be a bit cautious, and it still is ultimately straight power creeping on a card that is already pretty popular.
Definitely,
so I generally aim a bit more conservative on that stuff, right?
Definitely.
Where it's just like, I don't need to blow the doors off on every card we make. We can just make a card that's like, oh, you like this version? What if we put some sprinkles on it? I don't need to make the filet mignon version,
Well, Carmen, that is all 6 of the cards that I had sitting around that I wanted to talk to you about. Thank you for sharing some of the thoughts that you and others internally had about them. Is there anything else that you think you would love to leave with our listeners before we go?
No, I mean, honestly, a lot of it is, I just feel a lot of gratitude for getting to work on it. This is something where I've worked in a lot of different sects of Magic in my life. I have played Magic for a really long time. I had a lot of faith put in me by a lot of people inside the building. And in some ways it feels like it's paid off, but there ultimately is a lot of it where people took some risks that they really did not have to. And I'm really, really grateful to have gotten the opportunity to work on a lot of this. I understand that's like the corporate shit I'm supposed to say, but like, I don't know.
It's a little real too, you know?
Right. I don't know. It feels awesome to get to help bring in a bunch of new players and stuff, where that was something that I always felt we could improve upon. And it is so sick to actually have gotten to be a part of it and make a bunch of these cards that are just like simple one-liners. Like, I don't know. I love the hell out of Magic. All the sets I worked on this year are like Ravnica Remastered, Modern Horizons 3, Foundations, just like all stuff where it's just like, damn, this girl has played some Magic for a long time and a lot of it. So I don't know, finding ways to bring in more people to have that sort of nostalgia, those memories and all of that is just really meaningful to me.
I'm very glad. Carmen, thank you for coming on this episode of the Herald's Horn. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Herald's Horn. Herald's Horn is hosted, edited, and produced by me, Cal Jones. The co-hosts are Emma Partlow, Lexi, better known as Black Girl Mage, and Dan, better known as Moderately Anonymous MTG. All of our info lives in the podcast description. If you want to reach out to me, whether with feedback, you want to give me money, or you just want to send a letter to the editor, hit up editorial@heraldshorn.com. Thanks again for listening to the Herald's Horn. We are having so much fun creating it. See you in 2 weeks.